question here from Instagram.
This one comes from Courtney. What's your take on holding on to books pertaining to your career? For example, I have a pile of medical books that I've kept just in case I want to reference them in the future.
Just in case, of course, are the three most dangerous words in the English language.
It's the best reason to hold on to anything. Like when all else fails, just tell yourself, I might need that one day.
Literally anything. I mean, remember we had someone who wrote into the podcast. You can write into us, podcast@theminimalists.com, with your obsolete objects. And one of them was a gallstone, I think from the 70s that they were holding on to, just in case. And here's the thing. We usually don't even answer the just in case. It's just, I'll hold on to this just in case. Well, just in case what? I don't know. I don't want to think about it. Just in case I ever do want to think about it is why I'm going to hold on to it.
Yeah.
And so I think that quite often happens with books, or especially textbooks that pertain to your career. If they're useful to you, meaning you've used them. Here's another rule for you that I use in my own life, 90-90, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have I used this in the last 90 days? Will I use it in the next 90? I was wearing a white t-shirt the other day, and Ella looked at me. She goes, you don't usually wear that. And I said, Ella, if I don't wear it within 90 days, I get rid of it. And so I own 2 white t-shirts, and I make sure that I pepper them in occasionally if I'm going to wear something over top of it. I have a white t-shirt. And it freaked her out a little bit because she sees me in it maybe once every 3 months or so.
Yeah.
And then other times I'm just wearing my traditional black t-shirts. And isn't that what we often do, though, is we say, I don't have any boundary here. And so I'm going to hold on to this book just in case. 2020 rule. The 90-90 rule is the seasonality rule. And the truth is, if you're not using those books regularly, it's still not a problem if you want to hold on to them. If you like the way they look on your shelf, great. But if you're writing into a podcast and asking about this, clearly it's causing some sort of burden. It's taking up some sort of space that you wish it didn't take up. And so what are the boundaries that you can make do with that give you that permission to let go? And if you're within the boundaries, by all means, hold on to it loosely. But if you step outside those boundaries, it's okay. You can let it go.
Yeah. You know, I don't think that's something we've ever really talked about, the aesthetics of books. Like some books, they're beautiful. And it's totally okay to have it because it's art to you, at how you have your book set up. It makes me think of the Last Bookstore. Have you been there yet?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
Beautiful place.
And that second floor, how they color-coded everything. I mean, it's like an art project on that second floor.
It's downtown Los Angeles, if anyone wants to make a field trip.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I just love how, like you couldn't have that art project without holding on to all those books.
It's funny you're saying that because next week, I said I was going to do, during our home tour next week, I'm doing Bex's She Shed. That's actually 2 weeks from today.
Okay.
Because next week, I have 10 photos of all of the various books that are decor placed throughout my home. Now, I have my bookshelf, which are actual books I use, but then we have coffee table books that are, and also recipe books in the kitchen. And so they can be a part of the decor as well. The question is, what is the boundary that's appropriate for you? And even when I went back to that apartment that I had in Dayton that we were talking about earlier, Ryan, the big, beautiful loft apartment, I found a picture just yesterday of, here's another photo for you to put up on the screen here, Jordan. A photo of my coffee table in that space. It was piled high with books. I had no bookshelf.
Yeah.
And so intentionally, aesthetically, I took all of my books. There were a couple hundred books, or maybe 100 or so books that were just piled on top of this table. And it added an aesthetic beauty to an otherwise pristine space. That was the boundary I set up for myself. It wouldn't be wrong to remove all of them and get rid of them. It wouldn't be wrong to get wall-to-wall bookshelves either. The question is, what's appropriate for me in this chapter of my life?
Yeah. One of my favorite insights from David Allen's Getting Things Done is his recommendation that whenever you start a project, you define what it means to be done. Because in the absence of such a definition, you really can't distinguish whether you're just fooling around with something indefinitely or actually aiming to complete a project. Borrowing from the same fundamental idea, I would say, for anyone who is struggling with the whole just in case business, I would ask myself, what's the difference between just in case and no matter what? What's the difference between saying, I'm holding on to this just in case I need it, and saying, I'm holding on to this no matter what, because I will always be able to conceive a hypothetical scenario in which its presence in my life can be justified, right? Because there's always a hypothetical scenario that could justify you holding on to that thing. So when you say just in case, I think just in case is just fine, as long as you define what it means to be just in case and how that differs from no matter what. And so it's having the boundary. It's like if I say, hey, Josh, let's hang out someday. And Josh says, what's the difference between someday and never at all? If that statement is meaningful, I've got to have an answer. Can we hang out before the month is over? All right. I'm not committing to next week. I'm not committing to tomorrow. I haven't even committed to a specific time, but I've said, hey, by the end of this month, we're going to revisit this plan to hang out sometime and we can make it happen. So if you're going to keep something just in case, I would put some boundaries around it and say, what's the difference between that and no matter what? And like, all right, let's come back and review this in a month. Or let's come back and review this in 3 months. Like, what's the hypothetical scenario you're concerned about? About when do you think that might happen? What kind of time frame? All right, cool. You get to hang on to it for that long, but there's got to be a reviewing period where you come back and say, all right, this is actually a no matter what, dressed up in just in case language, and I think it's time to let it go.
Oh yeah, it makes me think how the 90-90 rule is kind of a just in case boundary. So you look at something, you're like, oh, I haven't used it or I have used it in the last 90 days. And then you think about the next 90 days and you're like, maybe, but I've used it over the last 3 months. So I will, let's see what happens over the next 3 months. So it is like permission to hold on to something for just in case, but you have a clear line that says, this is when I'm going to let it go though.
Yeah. You've got a deadline of sorts. And if you keep using it, wonderful. It's not a just in case item. It's a useful item. But if it's perpetually just in case, that's when I'm clinging. That becomes a problem.
Did you enjoy this standalone Patreon highlight? If so, you can listen to full episodes of the Minimalists private podcast available exclusively on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link in the description. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free.